Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about The Mandalorian Season 3 Episode 2 Chapter 18 called The Mines of Mandalore. Now if you watched my last video on this channel talking about The Mandalorian, you saw that I really did enjoy that first episode, but ever since I talked about that episode, people have been absolutely slamming that episode, saying that it was extremely redundant, that its storylines were repetitive, and that we learned absolutely nothing new. And to be quite honest, I don't entirely disagree with that sentiment. I just really enjoyed being back in this world with these characters that I fell in love with ever since that first season of this show, since that very first episode. And if you agreed with that kind of complaint about that first episode, you can throw all those complaints away for this episode, because episode 2 of this season was absolutely insane. It wasted no time getting to Mandalore, and we're going to be talking about it in full spoiler. So if you have not seen episode 2 of season 3 of The Mandalorian, definitely go check it out. It is one of my favorite episodes of the show so far. And before I get into all the crazy stuff that happened on Mandalore, I want to talk about the structure of this season compared to the previous 2 seasons, because, you know, I was thinking that maybe this show is going to follow a similar pattern to where, you know, the first few episodes are going to be a mission to go get, you know, IG 11, or is it 11 or 88, whichever the one, the Taika Waititi character, his droid, getting him back up and running before you get to go on this little side adventure, and then you go to Mandalore after all that happened. But no, this story is actually kind of playing out in a very narrative way, where you get to see the first episode leading directly into the second episode, leading directly to the third episode, and it's not these little like vignettes, these little mini arcs that Clone Wars was, or like the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian were. And I think that is an interesting change to take for this show, because you're going to get at least what I think is going to be a full 8 episode arc of this season that feels like one whole season, instead of like a couple episodes feeling like random throwaway episodes, besides maybe that first episode, depending on what your opinion is on that episode. But if that is what this season is going to be, I feel like I'm going to absolutely love it, because what I said after watching season 2 was I really hope that this show gets back in gear with the original stuff about the Mandalorian lore that was set up in both Clone Wars and in the first 2 seasons of this show, in particular with season 1 and the Creed and all these different things that Din Djarin kind of follows with his very kind of philosophical and religious beliefs in this Creed. And that's exactly what this episode does in just full effect. And not only that, but you get a great kind of follow-up with Bo-Katan's character, when you have her character be so distraught by everything that has happened to her in that last episode, where she's saying she has lost absolutely everything. She lost her family, she lost her planet, she lost all her followers after she lost the Darksaber to Din Djarin and to Moff Gideon. And so you have all this stuff with her character kind of feeling that regret of everything that has happened, and she has lost complete faith in the Creed of her planet, and kind of going back there and kind of exploring this planet with Din Djarin, showing him exactly what happened on this world and what it used to be, explaining it to Grogu about how great things were versus how terrible things are now, and where you have Din Djarin kind of being the foil to her character, saying no, things can be that way once again, once we get our people back together, once we stop fighting each other and we become one force again, we can become the Mandalorians of the past that have been so great. And I think that is what this story arc is going to be for this entire season. And when it comes to Bo-Katan's character in particular, seeing her grow from that first season of Clone Wars to Rebels to now this show, and just seeing everything that her character has been through up to this point, this feels like the most sequel-esque to those animated shows that we've seen so far, which is amazing to see. Yes, we got to see that Ahsoka episode last season, we got to see the Bo-Katan introduction to the show last season as well, but this felt like a very, you know, direct follow-up to Clone Wars, and that was amazing to see Mandalore in live action, to see this planet, even though yes, it was destroyed, it looks amazing in this show because of the production value that they're throwing into this thing. And I mentioned it briefly in my last episode of talking about the volume and how this show kind of pioneered that technology. I don't think they necessarily invented it, but they took it to the next level, and they put it in a big show with a big budget, and it looked incredible in those first 2 seasons. But this season is on another level. It looks flawless, and just exploring Mandalore in this very epic and sci-fi way is so cool, because you get to see all the creatures, all the weird alien things that are on this planet that are attacking them throughout this episode, and you get to see some fun action sequences with, you know, both Din Djarin, with Grogu even. Grogu has some active kind of protagonist storylines in this episode as well, and of course you get to see Bo-Katan with the Darksaber fighting this weird droid mechanized thing that was just a really fun sequence. And this episode once again reminded me of why I love Star Wars, because yes, you have all those fantastical elements in terms of, you know, the Force or the Jedi, or in this show's case the Mandalorians, and the lore behind all of that, and all the religious aspects that they pertain to in this exact planet. But you also have the sci-fi elements of all these weird droids and elements. You get to see this kind of creature that reminded me a lot of General Grievous in the prequels and in Clone Wars, and you get to see this mechanized organism designed only for kidnapping. maybe? I don't know. He could be another different version of MODOK. But either way, this little creature thing was really cool to see, especially once Bo-Katan takes him out the first time and his head crawls away back into his giant mech machine, and then she picks up that darksaber. That was my favorite sequence, possibly in this, maybe not this show in general so far. I really loved the ending of last season as well, but it was another highlight from this show in Star Wars, period. And that is always great to see in our Star Wars, getting these really cool, epic sci-fi sequences that is brought to this series with, you know, this world that they have built ever since that first film all those years ago. And it's wonderful to see this world brought back in such a vibrant way in this show versus something like Andor, which was a more grounded and serious thing, which I loved for different reasons. This is the Star Wars that can have all this wacky fun with these weird alligator creatures with flying wings. You get to see Grogu, you know, use the Force to push away these different monsters and try to escape this planet, with R5, who finally gets his call to action after 50 years of being thrown off to the side. Instead of, you know, him going on the journey with Luke, it's R2 that goes on the journey. Now, of course, R5 is getting his own call to action to go up to space with the Mandalorian, and he's absolutely terrified of everything, which is a pretty funny thing to see the show bring back. And it's so wonderful to be in this world again. And when it comes to Din Djarin's character in this episode, you get to see how he interacts with Grogu, how he becomes sort of a mentor, kind of teaching Grogu not how to be a Jedi, but how to be a Mandalorian. I think that's an interesting direction to take both of their characters, because when you got rid of Grogu at the end of season 2 and you bring him back in the Book of Boba Fett, you're kind of wondering, what is the purpose of bringing these two characters back together? There needs to be a serious point to that. And I think him training Grogu to be a Mandalorian, and maybe at the end of the season getting to see Grogu with a Mandalorian helmet, that could be really cool to see as well. But Din Djarin also has a lot to learn himself, because when he tries to wield the darksaber, he's still struggling with the weight of it. He's still struggling with the balance of how to use that as a proper weapon. And when you get to see Bo-Katan take that weapon and absolutely use it in a great way, you get to see that Din Djarin has so much to learn, not only about this world that he's living in terms of Mandalore, because he takes this soup that she made that everybody grew up eating on Mandalore, and he has no idea what it was. And so he feels kind of like I don't want to say a fake Mandalorian, but he doesn't seem as genuine as somebody like Bo-Katan, somebody who saw Mandalore when it was thriving, when she was in charge of Mandalore, or when her sister was running the planet. And you get to see how these two characters are on the two opposite sides of the spectrum. Din Djarin may have the darksaber, may be the person that is going to bring this Mandalorian civilization back to how it's supposed to be, but you kind of think on the back of your head, maybe Bo-Katan should be the one to actually do that. Maybe Din Djarin is only a piece to her story. And so this episode kind of feels like Bo-Katan is the main protagonist of this episode, because she's the one who defeats that alien creature. She's the one who saves Mandalorian from that giant beast in the waters at the end of the episode, and she's the one who has all these skills and all the assets to be able to take all of this and kind of thrive with all her power, but she also has lost her beliefs in the creed itself. And so you wonder if they can just combine themselves, can they both lead Mandalore together? And I think that would be a great direction for the season to go as well. And when it comes to that creature in the water, you know, I'm not an expert in Star Wars, you know, when it comes to like the comics and the books, so I don't know if the mythosaur has a lot of deep meaning when it comes to, you know, lore that is already established in the world of Star Wars, or if this is something that's completely original to this show, because they've talked about the mythosaur ever since the first season, it kind of being the symbol that is attached to Din Djarin. And so you get to see this creature in the water, and Bo-Katan is absolutely amazed that this creature is actually real, that it exists, and it kind of brings a spark to her eyes of that faith in her creed back once again in her performance in the very last shot of this episode. And it gets me so excited to see where her character can grow from this point as well. And what does this, you know, mythosaur existing in these waters, what does that mean to, you know, this world of the Mandalorians, and what does that mean to bring this creed back together and bring all the Mandalorians back together to create a society that will thrive, believing in their different creeds and kind of merging their ideologies together to create whatever they bring on to go forward in their civilization, essentially. And so I'm very curious to see where it will go. And if you are an expert in Star Wars, unlike me, and you know this lore is already established in comics and books like that, I'm very curious to hear what that is all about, because what they're setting up in this season, if it continues this streak of kind of one episode leading into the next one directly, instead of us getting a random offshoot episode where we're off, you know, talking to Bill Burr for whatever reason, although I'd love to see Bill Burr return in this season, as long as it kind of pertains to the main storyline, I'd love to see this show kind of change up its structure and be one solid season that kind of flows all together as one complete thing, essentially. And so I love this episode much more than that first episode, even though I did enjoy that first episode as well. What did you guys think of Season 3, Episode 2 of The Mandalorian? This was a great one. Very curious to hear all you guys' thoughts. And if you enjoyed this video, I also have some YouTube shorts up for The Last of Us. I also have some reviews up for Creed 3 and a bunch of other stuff that I'm going to be doing on this channel. So if you enjoyed, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, leave a like, and I hope to see you all in my next one.